So good morning from our side as well. We are welcoming you down here to some MiCAR topic to see how can you succeed the application process. Maybe just a short introduction about who we are. I'm Judith Hasler. I'm a partner at NÄGELE Attorneys at Law, and I'm heading the banking and finance department at NÄGELE. I'm currently advising a lot in MiCAR, but also coming back from the traditional banking and finance background. I'm heading over to Siegfried.
Thank you, Judith. Very warm welcome from my side. I'm happy to see such an interesting crowd down in the Keller Theater. Most of the people, I think, know me. I'm the Managing Director of Compliance Labs Liechtenstein. We are doing the nasty stuff, meaning we're going into deep and we're doing the things that are not too much liked, which means regulation, setting up frameworks, putting in processes, and we try to make it as smooth as possible.
Perfect. So now you know about us, but then we want to know about you. So can you switch to the Menti?
So maybe if that is not known to you, it's an interactive slide today. So we would like to gain a little bit of knowledge of our audience.
So join, if you want to join the toll, please join at menti.com and use the code 84696910.
And please make sure you're connected to the Vaduzzo Saal Wi-Fi, because I think down here the mobile connection is not too good.
So, and our first question when you open Menti would be, what is your role? Are you a crypto asset service provider, an advisor, and a financial institution interested in MiCAR or other? Also, the first ones are coming in, advisors.
What is the PIN? 84696910.
Should be also on the top. Wi-Fi
That's
password.
a good question.
So I think we've seen quite a mix of people in the room, but I think advisors and others probably just interested in MiCAR and the like. So going on to the next question. Where are you based? Are you from Liechtenstein, other European Union or European Economic Area country, Switzerland, or other? Okay, the majority is obviously from Liechtenstein, so not that far, but we still get some. We also get some audience from outside of Liechtenstein. Great to have you here in our country. Oh, and it's getting more from outside of Liechtenstein. So it's Switzerland and other European Economic Area countries. Welcome to Liechtenstein. So, and then going on to the last question, your experience with CASP, so crypto asset service provider application. Are you already licensed as a CASP? Are you in the process with a regulator? Are you preparing an application? Are you evaluating, or are you just here for the information?
Okay, it looks good. I think we can give some extra value to that.
Yes, I think that's still in the process, so maybe we can give you some input how you make your process with the regulator a success. Perfect. So we could switch back to the presentation, please. And we want to just do a short introduction into MiCAR and from the Liechtenstein perspective. So Liechtenstein has experience with crypto assets regulation for 5 years or more than 5 years now. We had the TVTG that kind of was a civil law framework for crypto or assets, kind of also, but also regulated some crypto asset services. With MiCAR in force, MiCAR replaces part of it at TVTG, but not all of it. Especially the civil law framework stays in place. Therefore, Liechtenstein not only has a regulatory perspective of the whole crypto asset services, but also can give the civil law basis to it. MiCAR applies since February 2025 in Liechtenstein and has a transition period until July 2026. Just for a notice, not officially yet, it has been granted by the government, but it needs to pass parliament. But it's planned to extend the grandfathering period until July 2026. And this grandfathering period is only applicable for those service providers that already have a TVTG registration. MiCAR introduces our harmonized regulation for crypto asset service providers to the European Union and the European Economic Area. And it impacts not only the large firms, but also the small ones. And especially for the small ones, what we've seen in the past, in the last few months, is it's quite a challenge because of the high resources you need to have for a MiCAR CASP license. FMA, at our Liechtenstein regulator, is quite open for discussions, and they have always been. And so they opened discussions summer 2024, and already accepted applications since October 2024, although MiCAR hasn't been in force yet even. So they are quite in favor. However, what we've seen is that they are bound by a lot of European Union standards that they cannot pass by. What is regulated, what kind of services are regulated with MiCAR? It's a variety of services. Especially what we've seen a lot is custody, trading, exchange, and transfer services. But other services as well, as giving advice or portfolio management regarding crypto assets, is also part of the CASP services that are regulated. Especially for the people coming from Switzerland, Liechtenstein can be a gateway for the Swiss companies to Europe. We have a same legal understanding. We both have the Swiss franc as a currency. And it's also possible to share some resources. I want to just say that we touch upon that later again, but it is still possible to kind of use Liechtenstein as a gateway to Europe. So that's enough of the introduction about MiCAR to just bring everybody up to speed to see what is MiCAR really about. So now we want to deep dive into the application and the application process, especially for the application in Liechtenstein. The FMA gives the information and updates in various platforms. You can find information on the homepage, but most information in detail will be provided via a newsletter provided by the FMA. So if you're interested and you want to keep being informed, please subscribe to the newsletter, because there you find all the newest information on what the FMA wants to see and what is going on. So example, we have a standardized application form since already last year, and this has been revised completely this summer, and the new version was provided via this newsletter in August. So as I just mentioned, we have a standardized application form, and it is mandatory to use this application form. And you have to follow kind of step by step what this application form tells you to do and what information is necessary. So, and Liechtenstein has the approach that you provide a preliminary application to the FMA. So you give all the information without submitting any original documents, but of course submitting all the documents and all the information needed according to the application form. This application form the preliminary application will be reviewed by the FMA. And the review by the FMA in this informal preliminary application process will be quite deep. So they will not just check for any red flags on key topics, just as resources and fit and properness of the UBO, but they will go into detail. So they will check pretty much the whole application and see if all the policies have covered all the document or the information that needs to be in the application according to the RTS. So you will get a quite extensive feedback and detailed feedback from the FMA, giving you advice how to move forward. And within this informal application process, you can make changes. You provide a markup to the FMA. You can make corrections and adjustments and make it kind of final. So as soon as you have the final version that is fine with the FMA, you can submit the final application to the FMA. And the FMA will then confirm the completeness within 25 business days after the submission and review and have a decision within 40 business days after the completed application. These timelines are set by MiCAR, and that's why the FMA uses the approach of the preliminary application, so they can kind of give you guidance also and make changes, so you can make changes. Because if they would feel like your application is not completed or not sufficient to give a CASP license, they would have to deny it if you just submit a final application. Therefore, that's the process the FMA uses, and the FMA uses this process also in other sectors. That's not something that is only for the crypto sector, but it is also used in traditional finance sectors. So it just engages you and also the FMA to have some discussions about how to structure and how to finalize your application. However, that doesn't mean you should just submit some first drafts that haven't been really reviewed internally, because that's not a good sign to the FMA, and the FMA will not take it positive. So it should be from your side pretty much saying this is our final, although it's a preliminary, but it should be already set and final. Coming to the timeline, the realistic timeline we see, and also have been getting guidance from the FMA, is 6 to 12 months. Therefore, that's why also the grandfathering will be extended to July 2026, and it is, as we will touch upon later again, it is essential to put in the application now if you're a TVTG service provider. Because if taking the timeline of 6 to 12 months into account, and 6 months at least with the FMA, it means even if you submit it now, the grandfathering is coming close. So if you have a TVT registration, feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to provide guidance on the MiCAR application process. So, and now deep dive into how to do an application and what we've learned from the real applications of the last few months. I think the preparation is key. So what we've seen, people or service providers start just falling into it, but it is key to get all the stakeholders on board in an early stage, make clear what the expectations from MiCAR are, and have everybody aligned on the process. And it's a big task, to be honest, and it's not something you should underestimate. So, for example, it's like a few thousand pages we submitted for each application, taking into account all the policies. Therefore, have a clear project management, clear guidance on who is working on what, and have everybody aligned on what the goal is. And in this stage, also external service providers should be brought on board, because then they can give you advice from the early beginning, especially with the AML topic, as well as the DORA. These are big topics in the application process. What the FMA wants is kind of, they want to be guided through this application form. So clear everything, explain everything clearly to the FMA. Make it like you want to explain your business model to a school child, because it might be familiar to you, but they see various business models every day. So make it clear to them and describe it really step by step and guide them through the submission step by step. Do not use generic statements. Do not use generic statements like saying, we will follow article XYZ of MiCAR, or this will be, we will adhere to it. Always provide specific and well-reasoned justifications. Why do you feel like you follow these guidelines? And reference the exact sources. So when you look at the FMA application form, you see kind of lines where you can provide a clear definition and also reference it. And not just reference the document, but reference the document, page, section, paragraph, and then clearly describe why you feel this section is enough to cover that requirement from the MiCAR application. And what we've also seen, especially with smaller service providers, is they are questioning it. They're questioning the requirements the FMA guides with or wants to have with the FMA application form. However, 98% are based on the RTS given by the European Union supervisory authorities. Therefore, the FMA is bound by that, and they just want to provide you with this application form a clear guidance. So they kind of implemented all the RTS into this application form for you to be able to go through it just like with a checkbox, but make sure that every box is checked. And if you're still drafting your business plan, use the application form the FMA provides as a guidance, especially chapter 1 and 2. Then it makes it easier for them also to review, because then you can make a clear cross-references and clearly guide the FMA through the application form. Like I already said, explain the content as if you would tell it to a school child or your grandmother. Tell them what you do in detail, simple and structured. A key topic that we always see is substance and local presence. So it has been not as harsh under the TVT regime, TVTG regime, but with MiCAR, local presence is needed. From a European perspective, the services need to be provided from the EEA, no mailbox or routing setups. Therefore, have local presence, but not just local presence in the European Economic Area, but local presence in Liechtenstein. Just like with the other financial market regulations, local in Liechtenstein doesn't mean in Liechtenstein for living at least. They have to come to the office, of course, to Liechtenstein, and the premises need to be in Liechtenstein. However, you can have people living in Zurich, Zug, for example. That's fine for the FMA, because there you can still give kind of the explanation. They can come to the office every day because it's in a reach, or at least 2-3 times a week. Everything that goes beyond, it's hard to define or argue with the FMA. And the FMA doesn't give a clear guidance saying like 2 people is enough, 4 people is enough. It really depends on the setup you have and how many people are necessary to have the setup working properly. And that means that depending on the service you provide, 3 people could be enough. For a trading setup, probably wouldn't be enough. So therefore, feel free to come to us and we look into it, or we go into discussion with the FMA together with you and see what is the setup that is necessary from their perspective. The substance and local presence doesn't only contain the personal resources, but it also has a premises perspective. So no post box or 1 room smaller office for 10 people, that's not what the FMA will accept. And they have made clear that they will go on site before giving the license and the authorization. So it doesn't. So have a setup that is literally there to be functioning from the first day you get the license. Not just give a FMA, as soon as we get the license, we will. No, then the FMA only will give out the authorization, the MiCAR CASP authorization, if the requirements are fulfilled before. And with group, we've seen several group constructions. Yes, it is fully understood from the FMA that this is the case, and that, of course, not everybody has just a single entity structure in Liechtenstein. However, the group structure shouldn't make it that the FMA, the Liechtenstein entity will be just a shell company to get the license. It has to be fully operational and has to have real intervention rights. The autonomy on decisions needs to be in the Liechtenstein company. From that, going over to outsourcing, but not just intra-group outsourcing, but also outsourcing to third-party providers. Outsourcing is possible, but the full responsibility stays within the entity in Liechtenstein. The decision-making needs to be done in Liechtenstein, and crypto asset services may only be outsourced to licensed CASP within the European Economic Area. So therefore, here a restriction to the Swiss setup. Of course, we're a gateway to Europe, but you cannot completely outsource the crypto asset service to your Swiss mother company. Of course, you can use certain services, certain IT infrastructure, but the service itself needs to be in Liechtenstein. For example, with custody, of course, you can use the same technical infrastructure than your Swiss mother company, but the key management and the key, they need to stay in Liechtenstein, and therefore, the decision needs to be done here. Therefore, it wouldn't be outsourcing of a crypto asset service, but only of using an IT service kind of from your group company. Also, a big topic is DORA, and I know it's a topic that is not everybody's favorite, and it's quite a hard topic. And the FMA made it clearly that it is mandatory for all CASP to have to be fully DORA compliant from the start. It is quite some requirements are coming from DORA, and of course the FMA knows that it is difficult to fully comply with these requirements, and they will put the same measurement to the new licenses than what they put to existing licenses under from other financial institutions. However, this doesn't mean that you can just skip on DORA. You need to have a DORA setup in place, and you need to be as compliant as possible from the first start. And you need to understand your system. You need to have the necessary documentation in place, and you need to guide the FMA through the process. This means you need to provide all the technical background. You need to provide also the legal background with some contracts with service providers. Therefore, we really advise people to engage a DORA expert from the beginning, to set up the system already DORA compliant as soon as possible, because even if you feel like you have not set up the system DORA compliant yet, and you just want to submit a preliminary application, the FMA will come back with a lot of questions to DORA. So therefore, do your homework first and make it DORA compliant as possible. So I'm handing over to Sigi for the compliance part.
Yeah, thank you, Judith, for your thorough input on the application process. Being like now or speaking for the topic of compliance, why is Liechtenstein still attractive? What does Liechtenstein better than other countries? And I think one big argument we still have in place is that we have very short ways to the authority. the FMA is still providing hands and is still helping, even if we are speaking of a very formalized and clear application process. But keep in mind, it's not only Liechtenstein, it's a European topic, and wherever I've been in Europe, especially speaking about the FMA in Austria, they are the same. They are exactly asking the same questions. They are also asking for resources on the ground. They are also doing the pre-application checks on the system and the effectiveness of the system. And this is maybe a pity for crypto, because we were not used to put processes in line and to be more professional than before, but it is the future. Having said that, I would like to shed some light on the most crucial points of compliance. We all know that Liechtenstein, beginning back in 2020 with the TVTG, already established a compliance framework, which was close to the compliance framework of other licensed parties, like not banks, but the other sectors. I would compare it to the investment sector, investment firm sector. And there was no differentiation made between identifying UBOs, having source of funds and source of wealth information on file. And it was always a big issue for Liechtenstein-based entrepreneurs and projects to explain that to the world, where compliance within the crypto space was merely given or just about to be established. So we are speaking about way more than trying to do an application on sum and substance and showing the fancy passport into the camera and getting from the system a clear approval that the person sitting in front of the computer is the same, like in the ID document. So what we are talking about today is building up a compliance framework that is really comparable to a compliance framework within an investment firm or a bank. So we're really stepping one step ahead and beginning with the business risk assessment, which was a crucial thing. And as Judith already said, it needs to be very precise in terms of describing which product you're offering, which delivery channels you're providing to your customers, which geographical risks you want to address. And thinking back on the time when I began with my compliance career, it was the banks having those issues. We had those cross-border issues, having those cross-border manuals in place, understanding which markets we are addressing and what the risks are according to the market. So if we have a closer look at this actually happens in crypto as well. And this is one really important advice I already gave back in 2020. Don't start because you have a great idea and you want to conquer the world. Keep your great idea, but focus on your main market and do the things right. Because once you roll into the problems and the authority is behind you, you are most likely addressing legal questions and fighting with the authority to get your business defended, but you lose time for your client. So the business risk assessment, meaning understanding the complete risks of the business itself, is crucial, and it is a very good task to understand what you do, where you do it, with whom you have a business relationship, and which risks you would like to address, and you are also willing to accept. Then the second big point, so I need to go through because this was just the oversight which we are what we're talking about. Having addressed the BRA, we come to a really big issue that ridiculously was established with the crypto sector. So thinking back of 2020, it was super easy to name a compliance officer, to name an investigation officer against the FMA. They just said like, okay, this guy has like basic education as a lawyer or comes from the banking sector, or also of course female, and you would be accepted as being fit and proper. So what changed with crypto was in essence It was mostly young people having a great idea, bringing tech people to the table and telling the FMA, we are good, we will do all the compliance stuff. And of course, the first pitch back from the FMA was, how would you like to do that? And that's exactly one reason why I'm sitting on stage today. This was one big issue for those companies to set up compliance functions, to make it work, to have efficient processes in place, and of course to have a business running that is also like generating a economic source and not only burning money. So what happened and what is very crucial today, the FMA really wants to see a deep dive on the education and the experiences or the whole career of the person, to understand that this person is fit and proper. And what is also really important to say, the FMA does not stop with the borders. So it's not only national education, it's the international CV-based education, but also the criminal record in every state someone has lived or has operated a business in, to show that you are fit and proper. So it is really crucial to understand that those positions are of a really important part in such a company as of today, not only the CEO, but also compliance. And as Judith already said, we already addressed the double heading problem. So if we have great resources in Switzerland or elsewhere in the European Union and we would like to make use of these resources, the FMA is very, very skeptical about to share those resources and to just install a compliance officer in Liechtenstein who already has like the group responsibilities or is based in another country. So please make sure you have experienced people on the ground and you make this setup really fly. Then this is actually what is meant by exclusively, no mixing up. So it should not, what you must not do, which is also really important, you must not combine a business officer, so a relationship officer being also the compliance officer in the background. That won't work for obvious reasons. And one big advantage we have conquered over the past years is that English language is accepted now in Liechtenstein. So you don't need to hand over German papers anymore. English is sufficient.
And that also applies for the whole application, not just for the compliance part, but the whole application can be done in English.
Yeah, thank you. Then one of the most underrated topics, because the FMA is really looking into the education of the compliance stuff, you need to have proper documentation on education on file, which means at least 1 to 2 business days a year of education for the responsible compliance officer, and at least a quarterly education for the team, so that awareness is given. The more you do, the better it is. And what is really new, because that topic hit Liechtenstein quite hard, is you need to show experience in the field of sanction management. So you really need to show education and understanding of the sanction regime worldwide and how you address it. And as Judith already said, please describe it in a very easy and understandable way, so that the FMA really can draw it down and does not have the feeling that you use a template of CLL and you just try to get the license as fast as possible. The last piece, which is really crucial, is the investigating officer in Liechtenstein. Being a small market, having scarce resources in terms of human resources, it used to be common to use the investigating officer, or to put the investigating officer in place by also having the same person for the compliance officer. Of course, that is not the idea of the due diligence law, so the FMA once more stressed on the point that the investigating officer needs to be segregated from the compliance officer, which means a clear segregation of the second and third line of defense. Then the daily tasks kick in. So we don't only draft all the AML policies, the BRA, the risk mitigation, but we also have a daily process we need to stick to, which is transaction monitoring. It used to be the case that crypto companies just used software for that. So Accurate Compliance, for example, or Chainalysis Reactor. And of course, you have those fancy flowchart diagrams to understand what transaction has flown through which sources, and you can have a first understanding if the transaction is of a bad manner or not. But what the FMA really wants to see is a sophisticated setup, meaning that you have clear processes in place, you have a routine, a daily routine where you look at the transactions and you really do your work in terms of simple clarifications, so going after transactions that are not in line with the information given by the customer. For example, we had the case students bringing a information to the table where they say, I am not really wealthy, I would like to trade up to 1,000, maybe 5,000 euros on the crypto exchange, and the first transaction has hit 1 million. So that should be something where people start to think that the information given according to or compared to the factual transaction behavior is not in line. And that is a really crucial instrument to find out if something is bad within the transactions or the customer and to go after it. That doesn't mean that this is not allowed, but you need to understand the purpose of the transaction. Speaking of this, we already have touched on the point-specific thresholds, and we move on to the source of funds, source of wealth discussion. Liechtenstein is quite unique in that area because we know a so-called business profile. That is not common in any part of the world. They call it source of wealth, source of funds documentation, checking on the background of the customer. But we really have a standardized form in place where we have minimum information we need to collect, such as occupation of the client, the source of funds, source of wealth, transaction behavior, etc. pp. It is a pity, but it is also of a very great help for the compliance, because you could always touch on that information and look at the transactional behavior. And that is exactly the background of this obligation. And of course, as I touched on it at the beginning, the use of blockchain screening tools is obligatory, which means nobody of us would be able to understand if a wallet is conflicted with criminal behavior, sanction breach, or anything like that. And if you think like that this doesn't happen in the crypto space, you just should have a look at such blockchain screening tools, and it shows that crypto never forgets. The small pieces, the small dust on every transaction is torn to the next stage, and once at a time it will be very complicated to find out if we really have a customer that has conflicted with the law or with sanctions, or if this is just a piece of dust that was torn along the transaction line. So the better the systems, the better off you are. Adverse media monitoring is self-explanatory, I think. So growing together, having a more globalized world, being more transparent means that we should have a knowledge of legal cases, media speaking about people, and the biggest problem with that, and I always tell that to my clients, is that there is a lot of blackmailing too. So if you have investigative journalists that take money for providing bad articles, that's giving you a hard time, and it is even getting worse for the future. Sanctions monitoring, I already explained. Liechtenstein is too small to bail, as we say, which means if we do wrong, we get hit very hard. We can see that by the OFAC listing of several financial intermediaries in Liechtenstein. And just to have a very clear message on that, if you're on a sanctions list in Liechtenstein, you're cut off from operations by 2 to 4 hours. That's like zack, and you have no access to your funds anymore, which means you figure out the hard time, and if it is OFAC, it takes you years to only address them and to understand what happened. I'm not speaking of getting off from that list. So please be aware of that. That is a really big problem at the moment. So we're coming to the end. Compliance effectiveness audit. As Judith already said, paper is very diligent. Means we can write a lot. We can hand over 1,000 pages of documentation. But what is crucial at the end is the effectiveness of the system, and that we really stick to what we write down, which is often a problem if templates are used, because the auditor and the FMA is really going into detail. They are checking on the effectiveness of the system, if we do the proper work as listed or as stated in the policies, and this is really crucial. So don't provide like 1,000 pages and be as professional as you wish to be by handing over a lot of written work, but really stick to your processes and what you really can do, which is at the end of the day way better and way more easy to manage those processes. And what really is important is, we saw that by creating BRAS and the AML policies, it is all about responsibilities. So the FMA wants to understand a clear hierarchy, who is doing what on which behalf, and wants to see that the tasks are perfectly drawn down so that they can take monitoring and supervising measures on people that are not sticking to that. Trainings I already said. Last point that is a really unique thing in Liechtenstein, we still have a law in place that says that every due diligence file, and that means like I would say 90% of the documentation of the customer, needs to be stored in Liechtenstein, either physically or digitally, which means we need to have at least a backup, a digital backup of all the files in Liechtenstein at the moment. Luckily, AMLD and the harmonization of the European Union is putting some pressure on Liechtenstein there, and we can expect, as far as I'm informed, that at least cloud services in Europe will be accepted in the future. So we will take another step into a modern environment. Good. I hope I touched briefly on the key points of the application. We are happy to support you. Liechtenstein is of a great country. You have a big access to a European market, and you have short ways. So take the opportunity and speak to the people here. You will get a lot of answers and a lot of opportunities offered by Liechtenstein. Thank you from my side.
Maybe also just from my side, thank you for listening to us for quite a dry topic for some of you maybe, but it's really important. And therefore, I just want to summarize quickly, allow sufficient time. We've seen it. These projects take time before even being able to submit the preliminary application to the FMA. And the better you do your work before submitting it, the easier it will be afterwards. So therefore, have a clear project management, clear guidance on who is responsible for what, adhere to the application template, and provide detailed answers, guide the FMA through, and consult experts. Like Sigi told you, feel free to talk to us. We're happy to support. We've done support from just reviewing a final application you pretty much finalized to providing templates and giving guidance in more detailed form. So feel free to talk to us, and maybe if you have questions, feel free to raise them now or otherwise in the coffee break.
Yeah, maybe a short top up from my side, as I didn't touch on it. Outsourcing of compliance tasks is like a very important sector in Liechtenstein, and the FMA recently stated that they are happy with service providers that are assisting. So it's not only CLL, there is more in the space. But what is important is you cannot shift all the responsibilities to a third party. So still, if you use outsourcing partners, you need to have like the basic setup in line. And mostly the clients are really interested in what does that mean in figures. So we had that discussion back in 2015 when IFMD, the Alternative Investment Fund Manager Directive, was popping into Liechtenstein, and where Liechtenstein already addressed the issue that we are not of a black box country anymore. We don't do letterbox entities. We really want to have sustainable and good business here. And they started off with 6 people in the field of alternative investment, of the Alternative Investment Fund Manager Directive. The same principle is about to apply for MiCAR, which means you can think of 6 people, and normally it is like one business-driven high-level, board member or CEO, and next to the CEO there is a risk officer installed, which also is in charge for compliance and the risk management. And below that there needs to be a structure of a established business in terms of having business relationship managers in place, having compliance, they said, at least 1 to 2 people working in that field, and showing that the resources for transaction monitoring and the daily tasks are given. What is not or what does not mean that the FMA is sticking really to that 6 people, but they always look at the project themselves, and they will give clear guidance what they expect from the businesses. So scaling up, getting bigger, building a team in Liechtenstein over time is still possible, but there is definitely no chance anymore to start with 1 to 2 people, as Judith said. And what is also really important, the FMA has clear reporting lines to the ESMA. This is also what they told us, which means that the ESMA is really asking about the single projects based in Liechtenstein. They would like to understand the business nature, the size, the operations. So it's not about Liechtenstein being super strict and having an own way of interpretation, but it's, and that's what I wanted to mention at the beginning, it's all beginning to be Europe, it's all harmonized, and it's standards that are to be established. Of course, Liechtenstein having a small size and being in focus and being easily supervised is of a very strict nature in terms of setting up businesses. But once you set it up, I think we are a very fruitful place to do business.
Thank you. So are there any questions?
Luckily, all are awake. That is good. Normally, if I do compliance, please.
There's one.
Does the MiCAR ruling is counting for every company attached to any sector in the token industry? So for an exchange, the token issuer, people working only a platform, is that the MiCAR and the 6 employees or the compliance rules for every company active in the token industry?
I can answer maybe from a regulatory perspective first. So MiCAR is a top-on kind of, it was put on the base, the regulation, the financial market regulation that was in place already before that. So if you tokenize securities, for example, the whole securities law still apply, and MiCAR is not applicable. So MiCAR is especially for ART, so asset reference tokens, e-money tokens, and what we see also is utility tokens. So there's a clear guidance on what kind of crypto assets MiCAR applies. If you fall under the old regime completely applies, and all the necessary regulations you need to follow are applicable there. If you, at least from a regulatory perspective, are unsure what your business model is, in Liechtenstein you have the option to ask the FMA for a clarification. So you submit, and we're happy to help there, a kind of like a legal opinion to the FMA saying like, this is our business model and we think this regulation applies. And for that, then the FMA will give you guidance on that if they have the same legal opinion. And that's from the regulatory perspective. So the most favorable answer from a lawyer, it depends.
Yeah, compliance-wise, it is very easy to answer. If we're speaking of a token issuer and we're not falling under the MiCAR regime or the e-money license regime, so speaking of non-regulated crypto assets, the token issuer is, from a compliance perspective, not regulated anymore, meaning back in 2020, the due diligence law in Liechtenstein set in stone that token issuing is tied to compliance needs at any means. And by its revision in 2023, if I'm right, or 24, it was applicable, they carved that out from the due diligence law, which means token issuing is not tied to compliance and identification of the customers anymore. But, and now comes the big but, if you don't do the identification once you're issuing token to customers, you will be hit very hard by the second line if you try to trade those tokens on centralized exchanges or work with that collected money within the traditional part of finance, speaking of banks. And we already had cases where accounts were blocked and they were asked to re-identify everybody who bought tokens or invested in a project. So my clear advice is, even if there is no law in place, and even that, or even this is okay under the European framework, please do at least like a very small KYC, like identifying the customers, running sanction checks, crime checks, because you have the better end working with their capital, and you will be free to like alleviate your business based on that token issuing. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you. May I?
Sure.
I have one question about non-custodial services. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, where the boundaries are, if there are any loopholes left for services where there are fully non-custodial?
You mean like you're just providing the infrastructure and like it's a self-custody kind of?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Well, we have some guidance from the FMA there. So as long as it's only a software, it's not regulated from their perspective. But it depends on the individual case how it's structured from the IT. But of course, it's like if you just provide the IT, the platform itself, it's not the regulated under MiCAR, only if you provide any services on top of that, if that fall under MiCAR. So of course, if you keep it completely technological and only provide the technology, you can get out of MiCAR without being a service provider there. That's the question you had? Or? But like I said, it depends really on how it's structured in detail. And that's a case where we usually kind of ask the FMA for clarification with a legal opinion, giving them the full picture of a business model, describing it, and describing why we think it's not a service provider. So if you...
Well, like the gentleman just mentioned before, the issues arise when you want to go off-ramp.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, well, I'm looking for this. Maybe we can talk in networking later.
Yeah.
Happy to do so.
Absolutely. Okay. Good.
Oh.
I
All
think
the way
we've
in the
reached
back? I barely see in the...
You still think that Liechtenstein has a competitive advantage over Malta or Austria? And if so, what are the differentiations? That's because we all talk about legal certainty and legal opinions, but we have seen cases where even there was legal certainty, then changed, and then the entrepreneurs were on the line. So how do you think Liechtenstein should position compared to Malta and Austria?
Thank you for the brilliant question. Now you're bringing me to a very hot topic. Of course, Liechtenstein always has an advantage because, and that is the first point, we have a long-standing history in terms of crypto dealing with regulation, and the regulator is already used to most of the use cases. And what I always tell my clients is, so far, except within the DAO framework and the decentralized field, which is of a certain complication, there is no business I have seen that is not sticking to processes we already know from the past. It's technology kicking in, and it's all about teaching the parties taking place in that project, meaning authorities, the project itself, etc., on the technology and on the new processes established. So coming to your question in detail, and speaking of Malta and Austria, I have dealt with Austria, and Austria is, to my understanding, doing the exact same things with 2 or 3 big projects in Austria. Please think of, that's a market of 8 million people. They have 3 big projects which they stick to, and they're very focused on them. So speaking of a big crypto market in Austria by hundreds of projects, I didn't see that actually. And the FMA is still very curious and very, they are still very cautious on touching projects and understanding them, which Liechtenstein is not. Liechtenstein is quite open-minded. We can hand over legal opinions. We can explain the projects, and the FMA will self-educate them or go after the project in positive terms, like learning and understanding and making things possible. Malta is of a different animal. We had touch points with Malta, and Malta said we can do whatever we want as long as we apply MiCAR and we interpret MiCAR this and that way. Let's see how this turns out. Of course, Malta is business friendly. Of course, Malta is like a historic destination for projects that would like to be easily established. But, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see Malta being, from a business perspective, in the heart of Europe, which Liechtenstein is. And it will be very interesting to see how the interpretation of MiCAR and in Malta will be accepted in the European Union. So we're at the starting point. If Malta has the better end, good, we will learn from Malta. But at the moment, it is like finding the spot. And of course, as we saw at the beginning, Liechtenstein is the perfect destination to match like Swiss projects and make them fly in the European Union, and the other way around. Bring European projects to Switzerland and make use of the Swiss franc, which is also a big advantage. So let's see. And I'm still very positive about Liechtenstein because we have a strong environment, we have a strong economy, and we have super smart people sitting in Liechtenstein. So I'm positive at all.
But that being said, you think that with MiCAR and Liechtenstein, there will be no future clusterfuck in terms of legal uncertainty?
No, I think we are already doing a very intensive job with the authority to understand what really is needed and where the red line is drawn. And of course, new regulation always takes time to have like clear boundaries and clear edges given. But I did not see anything in Liechtenstein that was more complex than I saw it anywhere else in Europe. And I think legal certainty in Liechtenstein will definitely be provided under MiCAR, and the FMA is one of the most competent authorities I have worked with in that space.
I maybe just add on to that, like the FMA, they are friendly for crypto service providers. However, they stick to the European guidance, so they will not just close their eyes or blink when you do something, but they want to have high quality crypto asset service providers. So they will stick to the European guidance. And of course, the European guidance can change and it can be something different in the future. But for the moment, they are not doing some gray paths, but they are really trying to have a high quality authorizations.
Definitely. Good. I think the moderator is already getting nervous. We need to clear the stage.